My face bore the look of utter shock. How could Uncle Zhang's coffin have been dug up? I fought back the urge to bolt like a frightened hare. Gritting my teeth, I moved closer. I shone my torch repeatedly on the scene. Yet, within the darkness, there appeared an old crone in a long robe. She was using her hands to sift through the dirt. When I beamed the light at her, the old woman looked up at me. "Granny, what are you doing here?" I asked, my voice quivering. My voice trembled as I spoke. The old crone glanced at me, her voice sharp as she retorted, "I'm hungry, looking for something to eat." Having spoken, she continued to dig at Uncle Zhang's grave. It seemed as if to her, digging up a grave in the dead of night was perfectly normal. My knees were knocking. What could possibly be edible in a grave? I tried to stifle my fear, reaching into my bag for a loaf of bread. Shakily, I extended it to her. "Granny, have this. It's good." "Dry old thing. What's good about it?" "Don't bother me, Willow Crone." The old woman gave my bread a dismissive glance. I quickly withdrew my hand. She resumed digging at the grave. I stood there, utterly at a loss. Uncle Zhang was from my village, after all. I couldn't just stand there and watch his grave be desecrated. I simply couldn't do it. Gritting my teeth, I continued, "Granny, don't call me Granny, call me Willow Crone." The old woman had a fiery temper. She suddenly looked up, staring at me intently. That gaze made my hair stand on end. Caught in that stare, my hair prickled. She looked at me for a few seconds, then rose to her feet. Slowly, she approached me. "Not bad, not bad. You're Ash Girl's child, aren't you?" The old woman scrutinized me for a moment, her voice softening slightly. I was puzzled by her words. Could the Ash Girl she spoke of be my wolf mother? She knew my mother, and she wanted me to call her Willow. Then she must be a serpent. No wonder she was digging for food in the graveyard. As I pondered this, the old crone continued, "Read my fortune for me. See how many years this old woman has left to live." My face turned as white as a sheet, realizing she was also a creature of magic. I had no energy left for fortune-telling. Besides, could I even predict the life of a sprite? Stammering, I asked her, "Willow Crone, do you know me? Knowing to call me mother shows you've some heart. Why are you afraid this old woman will eat you?" A hint of a skeletal grin spread across the old woman's face. I shook my head awkwardly. If she truly knew my mother, then for my mother's sake, she wouldn't harm me. "Go on then, read my fortune," the old woman urged impatiently. I had no choice but to steel myself and study Willow Crone's features. I looked for a long while, and with caution, I said, "You should have about 10 more years, give or take. Be more precise, little one." Willow Crone's voice was sharp, and her eyes turned a vivid green, seeming quite cross. I studied her right cheek a bit more closely. Then, bracing myself, I said, "You have 10 years. Willow Crone's emerald eyes were fixed on me, silent for a moment, before she let out a sigh. That's about what I thought. Hearing her say this, I breathed a sigh of relief. I thought she would continue desecrating the grave, but instead she glanced at me and slowly spoke. "In a month's time, I'll come back for another reading. I hope by then you'll give this old woman some hope. And today, for your sake, I'll leave this man's body whole. Remember, Gray Sister, since she is your mother, if you ever harm her, when you die, I'll dig up your grave too." With that, she vanished into the night. I stood there, stunned for a long while before snapping back to reality, gazing at Uncle Zhang's grave. I sighed deeply, and with my hands, I reburied Uncle Zhang's grave. We were all from the same village, after all. I couldn't bear it. After doing this, I continued my trek up the mountain, and by the dead of night, I finally reached the large tree where my mother was last injured. I called out loudly, "Mother, I've come to see you. Come out and see me." But there was no response to my calls. Anxiety stirred within me, and I called out again, "Mother, my master is here to capture you. Hide if you hear this," until my voice was hoarse. My mother still hadn't shown herself. Was she angry with me for not accepting the gifts she gave me? I gave a bitter chuckle, seeing that dawn was nearing. I needed to hurry back, even if my mother hadn't heard. I had come up the mountain with my master today. Perhaps I could save her life at a crucial moment. With that thought, I dashed back towards home. When I got home, I tiptoed back to my room, took a bath, changed clothes, and went out to buy breakfast. When I returned, I just caught sight of my master emerging from his room. I handed him the breakfast. He gave me a look and took the meal. "Have you got everything ready, Shao Ocean? Pack up, we're heading up the mountain," my master said in a cold tone. Hearing the coldness in his voice, my heart sank. It seemed my master was determined to kill my mother. After he finds her, I began hesitantly, can you not? Have you forgotten that cold-blooded creature? Who will atone for the 2 lives lost in the village? My master gave a cold laugh, staring at me as he asked, human killers must pay with their lives, but animal killers don't? I was left speechless. My mother had indeed killed those 2, but no matter what, I wouldn't let her die. Having said this, my master started eating his breakfast, unconcerned. After breakfast, my master slung his hunting rifle over his shoulder, and I rose to follow him. No matter what, if my master was going to act against my mother, I would stand in his way, even if it cost me my life. Just as we stepped out of the door, a black Mercedes approached from afar, stopping right in front of the shop. A man emerged from the car with a smile, quickly making his way to my master. This man was dressed in a sharp suit, clearly a man of means. He approached, respectfully addressing my master. Master Li, greetings. I was referred by Mr. Zhang. I called last week to arrange for today. I've come for a reading. You can read my fortune. Upon hearing this, I curiously examined the man. First, there was a red dot on his forehead, which to us fortune tellers signifies a mark of ill omen. Then, his nose was large, yet it bore the signs of division. His cheekbones slightly asymmetrical, and his face bore the harsh signs of cruelty, which meant he was the type to ruthlessly exploit others. This man was ruthless, and his fate was dim, clearly indicating recent troubles, and he might have been involved in matters concerning life and death. My master gave him a brief glance, then waved his hand. I'm not free today. Come back next Monday. Hearing this, the man shivered. But Master Li, I booked last week, and my company's issue is urgent. Could you find some time today to have a look? Show me a way out. If it's truly a matter of your company, I'll read your fortune now. Then I'll read your fortune now. My master looked at him, giving a cold laugh. The man looked quite embarrassed, and could only smile, saying, I'll be here next Monday then. Having said that, he returned to his car, and drove off quickly. What do you think of this man, Zhaoshan? My master asked after he had left, suddenly turning to me. I didn't hesitate, relaying all my observations from before. My master nodded, but then shook his head. You missed something about him. He's indeed involved in a life or death matter, but this case isn't directly related to him. He's simply implicated. Hearing this from my master, I recalled the man again. Though his forehead was dark, there was a red spot in the middle of his brow. Not a blemish, but something that could heal. Meaning, in simple terms, he's had a run of bad luck recently, but a turnaround is on the horizon, and that change will come next week. My master watched the departing black Mercedes, standing still for a moment, then suddenly turned to me. When this man comes next Monday, you will read his fortune, because I might not return by Monday. His voice was calm, and I was taken aback by his words. What do you mean by not return? I was somewhat confused. My master didn't elaborate further. He hopped onto his scooter, and I quickly followed suit, trailing behind him, heading towards the mountain. The journey was silent, and after half an hour, we arrived at the foot of the mountain. My master looked up the path with hesitation, then took out 3 sandalwood sticks, placing them in a row on the ground. But the moment they were lit, they went out. Having followed him for so long, I knew well what he was doing. He was consulting the mountain spirit. My master had told me that every mountain, big or small, has its own guardian spirit, who oversees all within its domain. We were going into the mountain to capture my mother, which could be seen as taking something from the mountain spirit. So I needed to offer incense to the spirit as well. But with the incense extinguishing immediately, it was clear the mountain spirit disapproved. If the spirit had agreed, the incense would have burned down. My master looked at the extinguished incense, his expression grim. Indeed, a mountain with its own rules. Zhaoshan were going up. He gave a cold snort and strode forward. I was surprised. He was disregarding the mountain spirit's will, carrying his rifle up the mountain like that. Was my master not afraid of the mountain spirit appearing? If the spirit appeared, the consequences could be dire. Seeing my master had gone ahead, I quickly followed. I couldn't stop my master from going up, but I could prevent him from harming my mother. Within half an hour of climbing, I started feeling something was off. Along the way, we had encountered 7 or 8 venomous snakes, and even a vicious wild boar. Though my master managed to scare them off, these creatures rarely appeared before me in the past. Because of my mother's influence, my path up the mountain was usually unhindered. Clearly, the mountain spirit was not pleased with us today. But from another perspective, the spirit was also protecting my mother. This thought gave me some comfort. But my master's expression grew more severe as these encounters with dangerous creatures became more frequent. Several times, snakes nearly bit my master. My master, who usually refrains from killing, shot a snake's tail with his gun, which finally made the snake group retreat. A shiver of fear ran through me. By noon, we had found nothing. My master and I sat under a large tree to rest, watching his stern face. I dared not speak a word, not wanting to provoke him. He had raised me after all. I knew his temper well enough. I could only pull out some food from my bag and offer it to him. He glanced at me and took it. After resting for more than 10 minutes, we resumed our search. By the afternoon, the snakes had mostly vanished, and the path was calm, which let me breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed the mountain spirit's wrath had subsided, though I reckoned it had warned my mother. She must have gone into hiding. Even my master's prowess wouldn't find her now. True enough, by evening, we still hadn't caught a glimpse of her. I felt completely relieved. Night had fallen. I thought my master would return home and come back tomorrow, but to my surprise, he started to set up a tent. "Zhao Ocean, come help. We're sleeping here tonight," my master called out to me. I could only nod and assist. Soon the tent was up. He told me to wait there for him while he went to gather some dry wood and fruit. After lighting the fire, I with bread in one hand, wild fruit in the other, eating slowly. After we ate, my master scattered sulfur around us to ward off snakes, insects, and rodents. He told me to sleep first. He would keep watch. But how could I sleep? I could only say, "Master, you sleep first." He didn't respond, just nodded, and went into the tent to sleep. Soon, his snoring filled my ears, while I stared at the flickering flames, wide awake. I couldn't fathom why my mother hadn't appeared last night. Was she angry? Or was it because of my master's words about the separation of human and beast that she deliberately kept her distance from me? As these thoughts swirled in my mind, suddenly a rustling sound came from afar, and quickly looked in that direction, only to see, in the pitch-black night, a pair of bright green eyes emerging slowly. I was jolted by the sight of these eyes. I didn't dare move, fearing they might leap at me. Luckily, there was a piece of wood nearby. But in the next instant, those eyes vanished into the darkness. I was drenched in sweat from the shock. I was about to turn and wake my master, but he was already standing behind me. My master stared at where the green eyes had disappeared, his expression more grave than I'd ever seen. "Zhao Ocean, go to sleep." "But master, just now," I wanted to say I thought some beast was out there, but he waved his hand. "I know. Go to sleep." Hearing this, I had no choice but to crawl back into the tent. I tossed and turned for what felt like hours, before finally drifting into a troubled sleep. The next morning, I was woken by my master's voice, soft but filled with pain. I was alarmed and scrambled out of the tent, only to see chaos outside, blood everywhere. My face turned ashen. I looked around frantically, and there he was, my master. His face was as white as parchment. I ran to him in a mad panic, then helped him up and we started down the mountain. On our way down, we met an uncle from the village, who was just heading into town. This uncle had come to my master before for a fortune reading, and seeing my master covered in blood, he was shocked. Snapping out of his stupor, he quickly fired up his tricycle and took us to the hospital in town. At the town's hospital, due to the severity of my master's injuries, we had to transfer him to the city hospital immediately. After much hustle and bustle, my master was finally in the air. Reflecting on his wounds, I couldn't help but attribute it all to my mother. Had she, knowing my master intended to kill her? These thoughts lulled me back into sleep. I don't know how long had passed when I was roused by the attending physician, who told me my master had been saved, but due to severe blood loss, no one knew when he'd wake. Moreover, the daily medical expenses were over 3,000 coins. Hearing this was like a bolt from the blue. My master usually earned just a few coins for a fortune reading, never more than 100 or so, and with the yearly cost of my education, his savings were meager. After a day and night of emergency care, I had already spent all his savings. Now, where would I find over 3,000 coins every day? I returned to the shop in a daze. finding less than 1,000 coins. Then went to the village chief, begging for a loan of 2,000, and with contributions from other villagers, I managed to scrape together about 5 or 6,000 coins. I rushed to deliver it to the hospital. In my haste, I checked on my master. His face was ghostly pale, still in slumber. Seeing him like that, I cried. Not daring to linger in the hospital, I left and went back home. Passing by that mountain, I ran up and shouted, "Mother, why did you even attack my master? He's the one who raised me." I shouted for ages, my voice going hoarse, but no response came. Defeated, I returned to the shop. I tidied up the shop, opened for business, knowing now that the daily medical expenses of over 3,000 coins depended on the shop. If I could make 1 or 2,000 coins a day, sending it to the hospital, my master should be fine until he wakes up. When he does wake, he'll tell me what to do. I took care to clean myself up, put on clean clothes. My master had said that in this line of work, appearance mattered. I was young, couldn't match my master's meticulousness, but I tried my best to emulate him. After opening, villagers bought some items for rituals, but the morning's total was barely over 100 coins. Many saw it wasn't my master in the chair, asked a cursory question, then left. I felt disheartened. How would I ever make 1 or 2,000 coins a day like this? Just as despair was setting in, a black Mercedes pulled up outside. My eyes lit up. Wasn't this the man from a few days ago, who came for a fortune reading from my master? At this thought, I sighed. Perhaps my master had foreseen this man's tribulation, which is why he instructed me to read his fortune. The man entered, his eyes scanning the room. Then he looked at me and asked, "Isn't Master Li here?" Without showing emotion, I said, "My master is in the hospital." The man looked startled, somewhat disappointed. "What bad timing. Your master told me to come today. My master has instructed me. I can read your fortune today." I looked at him with a calm face. The man gave me a doubtful look, mumbling some sounds, then turned to leave. Inside, I was desperate, but on the outside, I managed a slight smile. "Sir, are you really going to leave? Aren't you worried about carrying this burden alone?" The man gave me a deep look, still sounding skeptical. "Do you really know how to read fortunes?" I gestured for him to sit. He hesitated, then took a seat. I breathed a sigh of relief. Looking at him, I asked, "May I have your name, sir?" "Zhang Hao, 39 this year," he replied. I nodded. "Since my master has entrusted me." According to my master's rules, there are 4 ways to read fortunes: face reading, hand reading, bone reading, and breath reading. Which would you like? The man hesitated for a moment. "Let's do face reading." The friend who referred me said, "Your master's face readings are very accurate. That friend of mine survived a tough time, thanks to your master's guidance. He navigated through his crisis.